Dan Lanning and I see the world the same way. Well, at least I think so.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Thoughts on one of my favorite players in the class of 2026 with Brian Smith later on today's show, and pure insanity is about to ensue for Oregon basketball. I'm getting to all that today on this episode, which is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So, I think Dan Lanning and I see the world the same way. When you read a transcript from Dan Lanning's press conference, you have to look really hard to find a takeaway. I could be extrapolating ever so slightly here, but something that Lanning mentioned in his opening statement about this Oregon team is there's a lot of talent out there, not a lot of experience. Now, that's kind of stating the obvious, but the way I look at this particular quote is Dan Lanning does not say anything unintentionally or accidentally. He does not put anything out there he does not want to be out there or thinks has value to go out. If you go read the transcript, and my guy Zach Neal over at Ducks Wire has transcribed everything Lanning said, and others as well at Oregon's recent spring press availability, Dan Lanning is the master of saying nothing when speaking for 3 to 5 sentences, or 30 to 60 seconds, typically closer to 30. He doesn't really say anything. So I thought it was interesting that he noted, even though it's plain and obvious to all of us, doesn't mean that it always comes straight from the horse's mouth, that he's saying, yeah, it's a talented team, but there's not a lot of experience out there. Now, the reason that I bring this up and say, look, I think maybe I'm extrapolating facetiously for the sake of the first segment here on my show today, that Dan Lanning and I see the world the same way is, he never goes out, and most coaches don't, hype up a team and say, oh, this team's going to be great. There's no benefit to that, right? There's only a downside. But I'm glad that he did mention that it's not just a talented team, but also an inexperienced team, because that's the way that I look at it. This is a team that is 105th in the country in returning production. 43% of their production from a year ago, offense and defense, is back. By the way, Georgia's also very low. Now, on the one hand, that helps me temper my expectations for this Oregon team. On the other hand, it makes me really excited to watch them. Because last year's team, really good, really talented, really deep, really experienced, but now you're ushering in a new wave. And I think what's most exciting about the inexperience on this Oregon team is figuring out how it plays out, and also what the new ceiling becomes for all these guys who are filling in for, or who are replacing players who have now moved on in their Oregon careers to the NFL draft and or graduation. So that's what's really fun about this Oregon 2025 team, and why I'm as excited as I've ever been for the spring game. I'm always stoked for the spring game, always. Because it's our first glimpse at, hey, what's this team going to look like? Who's going to stand out? What do we know about this position group? What do we learn about that position group? There's tons there. But there is so much inexperience on this team that I have no idea how a bevy of starting spots are going to go or where they're trending. Because we don't get a lot of information, or people that are at practice they don't get a ton of information or access compared to some other schools. I fully understand why. It's just the way that it is. There's not that much to know, and that's kind of the first glimpse. So that's, to me, the most exciting element about this Oregon team is it's not a brand new era of Oregon football where Oregon's going to have a new play style, they're going to have a new defense, and they're changing all this stuff. No, it's just a hefty number of starting positions are going to be ushering in a new wave of talent. And I saw what the previous talent was able to do. Won the Big Ten. Very good. But now you're working to build that next crop of guys in a number of areas. And sometimes, you already have a high-end producer. Kenyon Sadiq, I think, will be a high-end producer. Mateo Uyunglele, I think, will be a high-end producer. Mekhi Hughes at running back, going to be a high-end producer. Like, there are guys like that, Bryce Betcher, Devin Jackson, Dylan Thieneman, go down the list. But there are just so many areas where when I was watching Lanning's press conference and he said that, I thought it's an interesting thing that he points out. And it's obvious, right? I'm glad that he's not trying to say, no, this is a super experienced team. No, it's not. It's not. It's an inexperienced team. And you know what? Maybe ignorance is bliss, and Oregon proves me wrong, and they go all the way to the national championship game this year. But I think the most exciting element for me for this Oregon team is seeing how the different puzzle pieces are going to fall into place and how they are going to put together the best possible team this year and looking ahead to next year as well. Now, that had me thinking of this particular question, and the question came in from DJ. You can be in the mailbag as well. YouTube comments, Twitter. You can become a Locked On Ducks insider, where you get priority access and a bunch of other perks as well. Link in the description below. You can get a free 14-day trial. So, long question here, but a good one from DJ. Hey, Spencer, avid Duck fan. I guess that's one and the same. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, I've had something bugging me for a few years now, basketball and football. It seems when we get into tournaments or playoffs, we seem to fall short with the outcome. What bothers me is that the teams they play have the players making plays off script or improving, I think you mean to say improvising, and making it happen. Kind of like big players show up for big games. My question is, how do we know if we play the best possible basketball or football of our system, or if our system is good enough to beat other teams, or do we need players that create over and above the system? So when I see a team that runs the plays and wins, I recognize that the season will be limited. Thoughts, counterexamples: Dylan Brooks in the Final Four team, Marcus and his national championship team. If we don't have guys who can not only execute but improve our system, that won't get us the goal that we want. Okay, you can work on your phrasing a little bit, DJ, but I understand the question that you're asking here. So the reason I wanted to bring up this question in conjunction with this thought that I had is this year's team, I don't think has enough of those sorts of guys who have been there before. Remember, Mariota was in his third year starting. There was a debate, would he come back? Would he go to the NFL draft? But he battled an injury the year before. It was great for him to come back. He could have come back for another season, but I certainly understand. He went on to be the number 2 pick, of course, and is still in the NFL. You think about the Final Four team with Dylan Brooks and all those guys. Yeah, you had to have a go-to, kind of a Band-Aid, just fix it, make it happen, make the plays in the big moments. When I think of those two guys, and I think they are great examples, and I think they are things that we're missing in different ways, more in basketball than in football, I would say. But when I think of plays where those guys just went out and made it happen, I think of a lot of big shots in the NCAA tournament. But how about the game against then second-ranked UCLA for the Ducks? Who hit the game-winning shot? Dylan Brooks. Who hit the game-winning shot against Cal that year? Dylan Brooks. Who hit a bunch of big shots late in the shot clock against Kansas? Dylan Brooks. You think about Mariota and that run to the national championship game. Yeah, the system they had was really good, but sometimes on 3rd and 11 against Michigan State in a top 10 matchup early in the season, a game that if you don't win, you probably don't make the college football playoffs since they lost to Arizona later that year. Yeah, sometimes you break, contain in the pocket, you almost fall down, and you just shovel it out to Royce Freeman for a first down when you're down by 12. And I believe they went down the field to score a touchdown after that. So if you think about this past year's Oregon team, who was the Band-Aid that could stop the bleeding in a given moment? I mean, you'd like to think Shellstat, but Shellstat's a smaller guy, so he can be taken out of the game if a bigger defender gets put on him. Biddle's a big man. He can be double-teamed, right? It needed to be Bamba at times, and I think Bamba did a lot of good things, but it wasn't quite enough, right? And then in football, Dylan Gabriel sometimes was that guy, but your question about, the system versus the players, the answer is you need to have both. You need to have a system. That Oregon basketball team that went to the Final Four, elite defensively, and had Jordan Bell and Dylan Brooks playing defense, and they were high-end guys. And the Oregon team that went to the national championship game, great offensive system that, Chip Kelly had crafted. Mark Helfrich was still running, but you had the guy who could just be the cure-all. So when I look at this year's football team, who's that guy offensively? You say he's just going to figure it out and make a play. Usually it's quarterback. Maybe Dante becomes that guy. I'd be stoked for that. But I don't think you can overlook the exciting but also uncertain element of the youth and inexperience on this Oregon football team. And I'm going to get to basketball later because that's a whole different conversation here. But yeah, you got to have guys that can save you in some spots. Every team needs it. For Duke, that might be Cooper Flagg. For Auburn, that might be Janai Broome on their way to a national championship. We'll have to wait and see. But I like where your head's at. I think the answer is you got to have both. That's where Oregon's best teams have come from. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, all of that good jazz. Let's talk 2026. Why the heck not? I like Oregon's recruiting class. News is going to arrive eventually. We just don't quite know when or who. Hopefully it's Jared Curtis. But Tradarian Ball is awesome. First, this episode brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Daylight savings snuck up on us again, and if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5 Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament, squeezing in a round of golf after work, or just trying to keep your busy day going, 5 Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. And trust me when I say it picks you up. It's picked me up many a times. I'm busy this time of year with podcasts and golf. That's a relative type of busy, of course. But if I ever need something to power through, 5 Hour Energy's right there. And guess what? They're all over the place, so go get yours today. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. Need one now? Grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized with 5 Hour Energy. So recently I appeared on Brian Smith's podcast, The Portal, here at the Locked On Network, and we discussed Tradarian Ball. We discussed other things as well. I'll have another segment posted on tomorrow's show, but here's what that segment sounded like, and yeah, I'm excited for this guy.
And today we're going to talk all things Oregon Ducks. They keep Tradarian Ball in the fold, and they also have some questions going into the transfer portal cycle, which gets ready to open here in a couple weeks. And to help me figure all of that out, there he is, that guy, the Duck Man himself, Spencer McLaughlin. Spencer, I know everybody's still going to recruit him, but anybody that's watched Tradarian Ball's film understands why people kept coming after him. He's from Texarkana, Texas, goes to Texas high school, and he is shot out of a cannon, bro. I mean, he is just flat out shot out of a cannon. Forget position, forget size. If you told me he would only play corner if he came to my school, I'd say fine. If he was going to play receiver, I'd be fine, whatever. But his stop and start ability he's had to have been a kid that's been in track forever, the way his first step is. Like, he's been trained and he's just naturally twitchy. So he shuts it down after Miami had him for an unofficial. Do you think this is a product of Oregon ponying up? Because the new trend, as you and I were just discussing, keep your guys, whether it's on your roster or in your recruiting. You think they ponied up more, but why would a kid go visit Miami and then shut it down?
Well, because obviously he knows that Mario Cristobal left the wrong school, and he wants to go to the right one. That was hanging out there. I could not throw that in there. But Brian, stop me if you've heard this one before. A smaller track explosive guy who's going to Oregon from Texarkana.
Well,
That ring a bell? That ring a bell? That's going to ring a bell for a lot of Oregon fans out there listening who are watching this, because that's kind of what comes to mind. Now, is he the second coming of LaMichael James? I don't know. I'm just saying those two things. I can't hear Texarkana without hearing Brent Musburger's silky voice go through my head saying, there is the young freshman from Texarkana, and watching LaMichael James break a 40-yard touchdown run against insert opponent here. So I look at what Ball brings to the table, and he is different because, to your point, there's positional versatility here. I mean, he could line up at wide receiver. He could line up at running back. He could be kind of a gadget guy. He could do everything. Like, really, he's listed as a running back. I get that's probably his primary position. It seems to me, and I'm wondering if you feel this way as well, it seems to me he's the kind of guy that should be listed as athlete rather than just a straight running back. Just because he can do so many things on the field. I get that primarily he probably lines up the backfield, but I don't know that he's a guy who, can become a LaMichael James, who's a primary ball carrier and gets the ball 25 to 30 times in a game. I don't know that Oregon's ever going to need him to be that guy with how they've stacked talent at this position. But I mean, he is one of my favorite film watches for Oregon in the last couple of years. He is crazy dynamic, explosive. Like the 26 class combined with 25, I'd say my three favorite films are, well, I'd have to think it through, but three of my favorite films are Ball, Decorian Moore, and Nasir Wyatt. Nasir Wyatt is and what all these guys I think have that makes them elite prospects, they're so twitchy. They're so twitchy. And speed is one thing. Speed is great. Troy Franklin had great speed. Tez Johnson is twitchy. That's the difference. DeAnthony Thomas was twitchy. Those are the sorts of athletes that I don't think come around a whole heck of a lot. And when you get a guy like Decorian Moore that combines high-end speed with twitchiness and great athleticism, that's how you get the number one overall receiver prospect in the country. So, yeah, I love Ball. He's one of my favorite players in this class for the Ducks. Kendra Harrison's in that conversation as well because he plays basketball too. But yeah, I'm pretty bullish on what he can bring to Oregon next year.
So I think that the NIL factor is a part of it, but I think, Michael James going there, and I'm just going to throw this out because everybody talks about, Oregon's just got big NIL. That's not how this works. Your relationships still are the bottom line. The NIL at the end, if it's close, kids will pick the school that they feel more comfortable with the relationships 9 out of 10 times. Oregon has done an incredible job for a long time. Obviously, Mario was there before this staff, and Lanning's a great recruiter too. So that's first off. But I'm guessing they did drop some money for him not to take any more visits. And why not? Keep your class together. And to put it in perspective, anytime I watch a twitchy running back or somebody that's fast, I know this is before your time, but I'm sure you've seen video at some point. There has not been a faster guy that I've ever seen in college than Raghib Rocket Ismail. This kid's not that fast. He was sub 4.3 out of high school. Like he ran 4.3 as the end of his sophomore year of high school.
I don't even think those guys are around nowadays.
That's what I mean. Like he's as rare as it gets, but that's whatever. This kid, there's a next step up from that. And he's in that really, really small group. And he's a kid that's just going to get faster. He hasn't found Oregon's weight room, which we all know, if you go look it up, is impressive. They've got a pretty darn good track.
Did you see what Javon Holland said about that recently?
I'm afraid you're going to tell me because I don't know how you can surprise me about Oregon's weight room at this point.
Yeah, so Javon Holland, who was a great player for Oregon and is a great player in the NFL. I think he recently signed with the Giants, but he was drafted by the Dolphins. And he was asked recently about, playing at Oregon and going to the NFL. And he said basically, I went to college at Oregon. We had all the stuff. I got to the Dolphins and was like, dang, this is the league? Like, this is what your facilities are? Dang, man, we had it better off down at Oregon with all the toys and tricks and everything. And basically said, it was nicer at Oregon than it was in the NFL. And by the way, Oregon is not the only college that has that because, the Ducks were at the center of the facilities race in the early 2010s. Before, I guess the uniforms were technically first, but before NIL, before the portal and all this stuff, like the facilities race was a huge recruiting tool that I'm sure you remember schools were invested in their facilities to separate. Now everybody's already there, and it's something that you have to have or else you stand out in a bad way.
Yeah, there's a handful of schools that's a little different. Georgia and Oregon are probably the two best facilities from what recruits have told me, and I don't think that would surprise anybody, and it does matter.
I bet Texas is pretty good.
I haven't seen anything recent with theirs. And of course, they've done all the stuff at the stadium here recently and everything. I'm sure they put out video. I just haven't seen it. Yeah, but highly doubt Texas or Texas A&M for that matter are missing out on any facilities. So, because they keep one-upping each other because they hate each other so much. But that's another story all to itself.
Always enjoy talking to Brian. I know you guys enjoy hearing that as well because, well, Brian Brian's just a fun guy to talk to. You know, he's a football guy. I love a good football guy. I love a good basketball segment too. Dana Altman is about to go bonkers. First, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NCAA tournament is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. Staying in the action is easy. With FanDuel, they've got all sorts of stuff over there for the NCAA tournament, and they've got all sorts of stuff for Oregon right now. You've got a win total of 10.5. That's a big number. That's a sizable number. And I think more reflective of the schedule than what Oregon's team is. However, still should be a pretty good team. If you think they'll be great, hey, bet them over 10.5. You can get national title odds, Big Ten title odds, all that sort of stuff, all at FanDuel.com. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. And you can get your college football gambling fix as well at FanDuel.com.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Okay. Did not see this one coming. Did not expect it. Don't know everything that was behind it. Bam Tracey is going to enter the transfer portal after previously announcing that he was going to return to Oregon for the 25-26 season. So, lots of things here. First of all, Oregon now has to go and find a replacement guy who comes off the bench and can score. Tracey, last couple of years, 7.5 points a game and 7 points a game respectively. But most importantly, he was a 36% three-point shooter in his first year with the Ducks and a 34% three-point shooter his second year with the Ducks. So Oregon has not always been a great three-point shooting team over the last couple of years under Dana Altman. And Bam Tracey has been one of the more reliable guys. He hit a slump at one point this year, but then he figured it out. So this is not something I was expecting, not something I had heard. This caught me completely off guard. Going, what do you mean? He was supposed to be one. Who's coming in? So the reason I say Dana Altman is about to go bonkers is if he doesn't go bonkers with his staff in the transfer portal, Oregon's not going to have a full roster next year. So the Nate Bittle decision is one I'll talk about more in a moment, but that looms even larger with the Bam Tracey news. Because right now, contributing players from this past season's team that went to the round of 32, really good year, not as great as it could have been, but still a great season for the Ducks to get to the round of 32 for a second straight season. Returning contributors who are guaranteed, I guess. I mean, we haven't heard an official word that both KJ Evans and Jackson Shellstead are back, but that's it. That is the list. Like Yin as a grease man in Ocean's 11. He is the list, or in this case, those guys are the list. Because Nate Bittle is weighing an NBA decision. If you have Bam Tracey back, you're losing TJ Bamba, Brandon Angel, Raheem Moss, Supreme Cook, Mookie Cook. Well, who else exactly is there? What other options are there? I'll talk about a couple of prospects Oregon is looking at in the basketball transfer portal on tomorrow's show, because this is the more pressing matter here. Oregon is, I think, going to add up to 7 guys. They could literally add 7 guys. I believe the total number of scholarship players they have on the roster at the moment with Bittle there is like 5. It is an incredibly, and remember, they have just one high school recruit in the class of 2025. They're looking at another one, who I'll talk about more on tomorrow's show, Braden Burries, who is a pretty highly touted guy. I think he's one of, if not the highest rated 2025 basketball recruit that is uncommitted at this time. But right now, the returning guys are Jackson Shellstead, KJ Evans, and Jamari Phillips. And Phillips played a couple minutes early in the year, but then didn't play at all. Oh, and Keyshawn Bartholomew also gone. I forgot, because I'm hoping Phillips becomes the new Keyshawn Bartholomew. Instant offense. Score the basketball. That's what he's capable of doing, scoring at all three levels. He might be asked to do a lot. But again, if Nate Bittle does not return, Oregon's roster situation goes from promising core to this is dire and they have to add a bunch of guys. And so I'm wondering what the chemistry is going to look like at the end of the day for this team. There are going to be so many new players. Now, last year's team brought in 2 high-profile transfers, and, Keyshawn Bartholomew was hurt, so he wasn't a new player, but he hadn't been around as much for the Ducks with regards to playing time because of his injury, and that probably cost Oregon a Sweet 16 berth with Couisnard and Dante. If you'd put Bartholomew in there, they win the game. But anyway, Oregon athletics and what ifs. Oh boy, where have I seen that one before? So Oregon could add a lot of guys. They have a bunch of scholarships available, and now they just have a bunch of needs all over the place. And so for Nate Bittle, if he doesn't return, that's even worse. Like, if Bittle isn't back, you're not just losing a starting big man. Yes, KJ Evans will be your starting power forward, but you will have no starting center for a team and a system, talking about systems earlier, for Dana Altman that has always revolved when it's at its best around a center in some capacity, at least in the last 5-6 years or so, whether that's been Nate Bittle or N'Faly Dante. Those two guys have been really, really key to what Oregon does, or having a great defensive big like Jordan Bell or Kenny Wooten. I am so puzzled. There are going to be a lot of segments about transfer additions on the show. Of course, they brought in Devon Pryor from Texas, so that's one guy who they've got in the fold. But there are going to be more, and if Bittle isn't there, the intensity has to ratchet up for Paul Mbia. I don't know how to pronounce his name properly, but we'll get there eventually. The Frenchman big man who plays for a team that's owned by Tony Parker over there. He plays in kind of the U21 circuit. A lot of those international guys have come over before. And, Arizona's had a couple. I think there are other teams in the tournament where I've seen them pop up. But anyway, so Nate Bittle's return is honestly, with Bam Tracy's departure, the biggest story for Oregon basketball right now, even more than who else are you going to add, because Pryor is an intriguing prospect coming over from Texas, who this past year averaged 3 points a game. So you're hoping he takes a massive step forward. Now that happens in college basketball all the time. It's not unheard of, but you're looking without Bam Tracy there. And again, I do not know why he left. I don't know if the coaching staff wanted him to leave or if he found a better offer or what. He's not going to the NBA draft because he's not an NBA prospect. He's going to the transfer portal. So I really did not see that one coming. And I like knowing that he was coming off the bench. And him and Pryor as your small forwards, I think is a pretty solid place to be. But now that creates another void. Maybe it creates an opening. Maybe Des Lindsey, who came in from the JUCO ranks a year ago and didn't play this season, maybe he's ready to go. I don't know. But retaining Nate Bittle, just from a proven returning production standpoint and continuity, Oregon needs him back badly right now. So hopefully he forgoes the NBA for one more year, comes back to college, bulks up, and helps Oregon make a run in the NCAA tournament, which they could do. I mean, Jackson Shelstad, Nate Bittle, KJ Evans, darn good core, but there are big pieces and big names that are going to commit to Oregon because they're going to have to. They're going to have to. Big numbers, I should say. Hopefully they are big names and big-time players. But this is a completely unexpected development for me. And I am now looking at this Oregon roster, kind of like Oregon football, like excited about who they bringing in. I mean, if Tracy's they're going to replace him with somebody. Who's that going to be? Maybe Pryor is that replacement, and they don't have their other two starting guys. If Bittle comes back, you still need two starters and probably three bench guys, at least two, if not three. So a lot to come for Oregon basketball. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.